From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Welcome to Wise Traditions, Will.
Nice to see you, Hilda. It's nice to see. We're not in person, but I can see your face and your hat and your beautiful face. You look great. Yeah.
Thank you. You've rubbed off on me. That's why I'm wearing this cowboy hat.
Oh man, I feel naked.
For a long time, I have respected the work that you're doing as a veterinarian and then as a farmer and all the things. It kind of blows my mind. We first spoke, I literally think, Will, you were like episode 4 of this Wise Traditions podcast, which was 8 years ago. And so a lot has happened between when we first spoke and now, especially in the realm of vaccinations. So I was wondering if you could give us an overview of how they tell folks who handle livestock to protect their herds from sickness. Can you give us the lowdown on that?
Well, there's two worlds in livestock. There's the commodity factory farms, and then there's the rest of us. And it's worlds apart. It's completely different. So if you have a factory farm, in other words, confinement livestock, CAFO, confined animal facility, you need all the vaccine in the world and all the chemicals in the world, the antibiotics, because they're living in their own manure. They're eating a GMO, genetically modified diet. They're cram jammed together, and they're under unreal production pressure. You know, you got to bang out a calf every year. You got to have 2 litters of pigs a year. So it's a recipe for disaster. And again, when you eat in a restaurant, you're going to be eating factory farm food, period. I live in a city of millions of people in Minneapolis, and I think there's one farm restaurant here that's the real deal. They serve food from their own farm, and with the exception of like orange juice and coffee, everything, all their produce, they raise all that. They raise the pork, the chicken, the eggs, the dairy products, but the rest of it, you're looking at Cisco truck basically. And so it really makes eating out difficult and makes travel difficult. I travel mostly to food deserts. I work in the country in rural areas, like for Thousand Hills Cattle Company, where I work. We're aggregators for grass-fed beef, and we have at any given time maybe 60 producers, and these are mostly maybe they sell us 5 head a year. Maybe they sell us the biggest would be 100 a week. But in that process, we aggregate between 250 and 350 animals a week that are 100% grass-fed. And I have visited every single farm that they're following my instructions. I'm the consulting veterinarian for Thousand Hills. So I get to have boots on the ground. I really get to see that. But boy, is that rare. And it's also rare for any restaurant to take our beef and put it on their menu. We had one restaurant in St. Paul, the Twin City town, and all the beef they served there was Thousand Hills beef, and it was really awesome that you could go in there and relax. You don't have to worry about the beef. And then they tried to do that with the potatoes and the corn and the carrots and the peas and the salad. You know, so we're a long way from where we need to be with restaurant food.
So, Will, we have some listeners who might not quite understand why you're saying it matters. Why does it matter the provenance of the meat on the table in the restaurant or in the grocery store? Why does its provenance matter? Why does it matter if it comes from a concentrated animal feeding operation or a factory farm versus a regenerative farm? What difference does it make in the quality of the meat?
So many answers. Let me count the ways. But let's start with the fact that the number one source of pollution on the planet is what industry? What would you guess?
Well, they say it's the cattle industry.
Well, it's agriculture in general.
Yeah.
Globally, the number one source of pollution is agriculture. So how we produce food for people is a determinant in pollution. So the runoff from a feedlot, they've converted manure, which in our systems is God's gift to farming, manure as fertility. They've converted that into a toxic waste product that they can't get rid of. And about the only way they've found to get rid of all the manure, because let's say hogs, for example, they live on a slatted floor in a factory farm. So all the poop and urine goes down into a system that washes it into a major manure lagoon. And this is true of most dairies too. All the manure that's in the barn is flushed into a lagoon manure pit. And that's Chernobyl. I mean, it's just really toxic. So when we eat that food, we're supporting more of that. And those people don't have your interest in mind. They are looking at the bottom line. Most are owned by corporate entities. And for the pigs, a classic example is a modern factory farm for pigs, where Cargill or ADM or some large corporation, they own the pigs, they own the barns, they own the feed, and the farmer is just a janitor. That's all he gets, just to clean up the mess. And then if he doesn't do it right, he doesn't get paid. So it's a sick system. And I've helped only one that I can recall that was a nasty factory farm for hogs. I just don't work with them. They don't like what I do. They don't follow my directions. And even if they do temporarily, as soon as things get better, they start backing things down. Like, well, we're pampering them, and they use that word derogatively. I use it as like, yeah, I want to pamper my livestock. Why would you not want to pamper your livestock? Well, they don't. So, like with dairies, if they're not losing animals on a daily basis, if there aren't a pile of dead animals every day, they feel like that we got to cut something back, and they do. So this one large dairy or hog operation called me because they were getting eaten alive by first they had PRRS, which is a respiratory disease of hogs. Wipe them out. It's just like it's a pandemic for hogs. Well, then they lost them almost everything. Then they recovered, and they had PED, which is another disease of baby piggies. We call it pigs everywhere dead. That's not the real name for it, but it's this episode. So they call me, and it's a father and 4 sons. And so it's 5 families that live off of this operation. Well, they have, at the time I started working with them, 3,000 sows. Now, the sows are living in a crate. They're in a gestation crate, which is just big enough. I've heard it aligned to an airplane seat. Like you're pregnant and you're living in an airplane seat. You can't get out of it.
Wow.
They can't turn around. They can't scratch their butt. They can't do anything. And when I was let in there, I felt sorry for these farmers. They really wanted to break out of this deal, but they were trapped. Mm-hmm. So I said, Matt, okay, I'll try. I'll work with you. I know I can solve your problems. I just don't know if you believe it. So the first thing you do, you go to a chain link fence, and they unlock a big lock. And then you go to another chain link, and then the doors are all locked. So 3 layers of locking. And there are signs like no germs in, no germs out. Restricted facility. No access, there's all these signs that you don't associate. You're thinking old McDonald's farm, So yeah. It's like a nuclear power plant to get in. So then when you go in, you have to take all your clothes off, and you take a shower, and you have to scrub with a disinfectant soap all over your body, your hair, everything. Then you dry off, and then they put you in a moon suit with boots, with gloves, with earplugs, because you go deaf in there. With goggles and a respirator. So then you haven't even gone in yet. So that do all that. So you go in there. Well, you can see maybe 100 crates. Your eyes can see that far. 200, 300, 400, thousands of hogs in all these crates. And the screaming is just like it's deafening even with earplugs. And the respirator was on me 100% of the time. But for days, my nose was running. I was congested from having breathed all that nitrogenous waste that's in the air. It's ammonia. You're breathing ammonia. Well,
and
guess what?
Why are the animals screaming, Will, do you think?
They're in pain. They're in misery. Their pigs are smarter than some humans. They're certainly smarter than dogs. So of all the animals to torture, a pig is really not a good one. And I don't know why it's done. California, this is breaking news. They just passed a law. You can't have hogs in crates anymore. Crate-free hogs. This is in California only. And this is in the last 3 days. So in our newspapers filled with hog farmers like, whoa, we'll go broke and it's dangerous. You're putting us out there with these dangerous animals if they're not in a crate, which is total not true.
Yeah.
Front.
Thank you for censoring yourself. This is a clean show. So you're like, it's total not true.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you know what I was thinking though.
Yeah.
But so anyway, the what I did on this farm is I said, well, we have to get them out of the crates, and we have to do, I put them on a natural program, no antibiotics, cut off all the antibiotics. So the guys called me the next day and said, yeah, we had 7 more deaths today. I was okay. They called me the next day. They said, well, we had 5 more deaths today. So about the third day, this guy was these guys are desperate. They're dying. They're going bankrupt. A lifetime, generations. He said, I thought you said you could help me. And I said, well, yeah, I can, but you were falling off a cliff when I met you. And of course, you're going to go down a little further before we start going back up. Well, it was the 3rd or 4th day. They only lost 1 piggy, and then they never lost another one after that. So these farmers now have cut down to 450 sows, mama sows. They have the boars. They do natural breeding now. And they're making more money than they made when they had their average is about 1,200 sows. They were in the thousands. This is concrete city. This is like the airport. It's concrete. Well, what are we going to do with all this concrete? I go, well, that's a good question. Do you have a bulldozer? So we're starting to dig some of it up. But they're now producing hogs for these humane certified, like Nyman pork. Actually, that's the one they're producing for, and they get such a premium for their meat that they're actually making more money. Pigs sell for about 60 cents a pound now. So you do all this work, you're all day long, you're cleaning up hogs and feeding them. You get 60 cents a pound. And it was as low as 11 cents just a year or two ago. So now they're getting several dollars a pound for this valuable pork. They're so happy, and they don't have to live in this hellhole anymore. But that was a rare exception for success. And I hope to do more of that. But again, they don't like my version of what they're doing. And in the newspaper this week, there's all these editorials. It's like, well, our pigs are not, what would they do anyway? Which reminds me of a story. A New Yorker was driving through the countryside, and he saw this farmer holding a pig up to an apple tree, and the pig was munching on the apples. And the New Yorker was just so curious. He said, why are you doing that? You can save so much time just by letting the pig eat them off the ground. And the farmer said, well, what's time to a pig? So, it's kind of like that dichotomy. And the only reason they get away with it, to answer your question, is that people don't know. They don't know how bad it is. There's no way you could even get in, for one. They're so terrified that a PETA rep will come in and take videos of and it's another sign you see on factory farms is no videotaping. So big sign, no videotaping.
Wow. Okay. So these factory farms that with thousands and thousands of animals are creating contamination because they don't know what to do with the waste. They're not using the waste as fertilizer, but it's running off into streams and bays and things like that.
You don't want to live within 10 miles of one of these factories.
Oh, right. They stink. Right. And then number 2, they're mistreating the animals. So, and then from what I understand as well, when the animals are in that stressful condition their whole life, then when we partake of that animal, whether it's fat, which may be loaded with toxins, or it's muscle meat, we're going to get some of that energy and that cortisol and all those things that are, not to mention the ingredients that are in vaccines. And that takes me to that question, Will. So talk to us about the role of vaccinations in these factory farms.
Well, my answer is going to change. And I'm glad we're on the Weston A. Price site, because Dr. Tom Cowan has really done an enormous service to us, even though it's disrupting, because he's pretty much asking people, prove to me that there is such a thing as a virus. And there's a doctor in Germany. He's a biochemist. He's asking people. He said, "I'll give you 100,000 euro reward if all you do is just show me one study where they've actually isolated a virus." So this is really interesting. He's had that reward out there for 3 years. Nobody's claimed it. Nobody proved that they've isolated a virus.
Wow.
So they're called the no virus sect of medicine now, and they're shunned. And as you probably know, Dr. Tom Cowan had to surrender his medical license because of his beliefs. He believes that humans are biologically alive, that they're energetically alive, which, by the way, back to that question about eating factory meat has bad energy in it, from not from a chemical sense, but from the energy that's put into it in that god awful situation. They only have one good day of their life, and that's the day they're killed to relieve them from the torture. So is that the energy you want to put in your body? And again, that mainly is true for those of us that believe that food has energy in it, even if it's a carrot or a head of lettuce, if it's water, any liquid, it has the energy of the person that raised it or the person that cooked it or the surroundings. So that's another reason. And we did this with Thousand Hills when we first started in 2002. Our message was save the planet and enjoy doing it. In other words, this talk about the pollution, the loss of water, the loss of everything. It didn't sell grass-fed beef. It was not. Okay, so we said, well, grass-fed beef has a different pH. It's not a pH that deadly pathogens grow in. So you will never see salmonella, listeria, all the deadly pathogens in this type of meat. I suppose you could almost make it happen, but you'd really have to work at it. Same is true of raw milk, which is a whole other topic that we've talked about a lot. But we thought, well, the health part didn't sell. Okay, so we thought, well, let's sell grass-fed beef based on the fact that the fat in it is omega-3 fat, the good fat, the anti-inflammatory fat, whereas factory pork or beef or chicken or egg is eating a lot of seed oil. So they have omega-6 oil, which is the inflammatory fat that's in the meat. So we thought, well, why don't you not get a heart attack or a stroke? Why don't you eat this meat? Because it's full of omega-3 fat. And I'm not doing as great a job as we did with marketing then. It still didn't sell. Do you know what sold it?
I happen to know, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, we each of us that worked there, was only 5 of us, but we each got a little grill and an apron and a cowboy hat. And we went to all the food co-ops and the health food stores. And we had our little grill there, and we were grilling hamburger or steak. Would you like to try some 100% grass-fed beef? And, that also, there's kind of a barter system agreement that if they take your sample, you have, it's 10 seconds, 30 seconds to say something. But what happens is when you put it in their mouth, the first word that comes out of their mouth almost universally is, wow. So and then it jumps in the grocery cart, believe me. And then the second word that came, or sentence, anybody over about 50, they would say, oh, I remember when beef used to taste good. Now beef tastes like ketchup or Heinz 57 because it has no flavor, no good flavor. And pork tastes like what they're walking around in the confinement facility. So flavor really sells the beef. And again, it's funny when you're in a grocery store demonstrating grass-fed beef because they'll be pushing their cart. And it's really an interesting hobby. If you just go to any grocery store or supermarket and see what people are pushing around their cart and then what they look like.
Oh, interesting.
We are what we eat. And a lot of times there'd be like 5 pounds of garbage hamburger in their cart. And they go, this is not for me. My husband's family, I'm having an in-law gathering and they don't care what they eat. So they're going to eat it.
Oh my gosh.
People get very defensive when you look into their grocery cart, like, oh, you got 15 pounds ice cream in there.
Right. It's like looking in their bank account. They feel their privacy has been violated.
Well, but it happens to taste good. Good grass-fed beef happens to taste really good. It also rings your bell. And I've cooked thousands of steaks for guys, tens of thousands. And you give a guy that would normally eat a 32 or 42 ounce steak at Ruth Chris Steakhouse and then ask for dessert. You give them an 8 to 12 ounce ribeye or New York strip that's grass fed. They push away from the table. It's like, God, I feel great. I'm full, and it's because it rings your bell. It's got all that satisfaction in it with all the minerals and vitamins and nutrients. Your body recognizes good food. So there's a lot of reasons on both sides. There's a lot of reasons why people, I can't afford all that organic food. We have to eat. We clip coupons. And do you have a cell phone? Yeah, I have a cell phone. Do you have cable TV? Yeah, I have that. So again, it's like, where are you spending your money?
Absolutely.
And the phrase that we used to use was, would you rather pay your farmer or your doctor? But I know you want to talk about vaccine, and I do too, because that is a bell ringer for getting people's attention. Right now, I was pleasantly shocked at how many people were reacting negatively to the news that came out that there's mRNA vaccine available for livestock. Because they've already demonstrated that if you give it to an individual, it's already in the milk the next day. So in humans. So the babies are getting it. They're getting the lipid nanoparticles. They're getting these adjuvants and things that are in this vaccine, even though they didn't eat it themselves. And the industry always pushing that edge. They're inventing aerosol vaccines, so you don't even have to get jabbed. Or you put it in the water. And everybody's vaccinated. That's what they want, especially for poultry operations. And poultry operations are very similar to what I said about the pigs. They're highly confined. You see these pictures of, it's just wall-to-wall chickens or turkeys or ducks. And then they can't figure out why they're getting avian flu. I quit clipping articles about avian flu, what it was costing the government and people and farmers. It's in the billions of dollars. Because what they do, if you test positive for avian flu, guess what? The next step is they kill everything.
Wiping it out. Yeah, wiping them out. Oh, it's so sad.
It's genocide. It's absolute criminal, but they will wipe out every animal you have. And there was a while back ago, we had a guy named Mark Purdey. Do you remember Mark Purdey? You can't interview him now because he's in heaven, but he died at 42. He's a dairy farmer in England. And he was the guy that was the whistleblower about what people call mad cow disease. Yes. He knew that it was not contagious, but he couldn't prove it. So he went about his life, because this guy had 2 times that the government agents came out and machine gunned his whole dairy herd in front of him and his wife and children.
Oh, no.
That was for foot and mouth disease. One of his neighbors had foot and mouth in their cattle. So anybody that was adjacent to that farm had to exterminate all their animals. So that was hideous. And that was PTSD for him. It was permanently scarred him. Well, then when this BSE came out, the same thing happened. He had his whole herd exterminated because of the fear of BSE. So he went on a rampage. He went, you might say, insane, or he actually got sane. And he proved that the prion diseases are not an infectious agent, but it's an environmental disease. And in his particular world, where the path of the supersonic, the SST from Paris to London, that thing was supersonic. So it was a sonic boom. And he found out that the sonic boom triggered a reaction in the brain where they're storing certain elements in the brain. And when there's certain things like a sonic boom will trigger it and it blows holes in your brain. Fungiform encephalopathy. And the same is true of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans, which is human mad cow, or all the other prion diseases. Now we have chronic wasting in our deer herds. We have scrapie in sheep. These are prion diseases. It's been proven that mRNA vaccine triggers prion diseases too.
Wow.
It's way beyond that. And then earlier in Europe, they had a fear of this foot and mouth disease. So they gave everybody an organophosphate, Phosmet, which is organic phosphate is an insecticide. It's a wormer. And they were afraid of the germ. So they gave it at least double amount. And when they use Fosmet, they pour it down the back of the animal. It's a pour on right down the spine. Well, what's right under the skin on the spine? The spine, the spinal cord. And that Fosmet was changing the chemical makeup of the brain and nerves. And it turned it into basically a battery where the energy, the electrical energy that all nervous systems have was stored. And then certain things like the sonic boom is just one example of several things that explode that battery and you get these releases. So that's a whole nother deal related though to the same thing. And again, here we are again with things that trigger it. The avian flu people say, oh yeah, well the wild birds are carrying it. They don't get sick from it, but they're carrying it. So we have to keep the wild birds out of our farm. So they're shooting, they're poisoning, they're killing these wild birds because that's the source of this pathogen.
Wow. Well, this sounds oddly familiar to me because during COVID, they were saying it's all the unvaccinated people that are making everyone else sick, and they're the ones carrying it, even though, what do they call it? Like the, non-symptomatic carrier. And I was like, or asymptomatic carrier. I thought, that's so insane. It's so illogical that a person could have something and spread it, though they have no effect on themselves. It's just kind of reverse psychology or something, some weird way of looking at it.
People love that one because it enables them to, get away from the fact that I would say, I don't want it, so I don't want to get it, and it's my health, so therefore, see ya. No, they say, well, yeah, but you're making your family and your neighbors vulnerable because of your selfish choice. And if you love other humanity, you will get jabbed. So it's a great sales pitch for them.
It is. But so going back to the livestock, I do have many people in my circles who are concerned that they don't want to consume meat that has been given an mRNA vaccine. So how common is it? And is it common among regenerative farmers, let's say?
Okay, the first answer is a cumulative answer from Tom Cowan and the other people that I respect, Andy Kaufman and others, is we don't know how common it is because it's a well-kept secret. We know for sure that there are swine vaccines that are mRNA with the lipid nanoparticles and all the other problems. Those are for sure that they exist. How common it is, we don't know. They want this aerosol vaccine very badly for the poultry industry, especially. But there's a very easy way to make sure that the meat you're eating doesn't have mRNA vaccine in it. Ask the farmer and find out if they use any vaccine. Because our 60 producers, we might have one or two newcomers that haven't been able to elevate their mentality to the position where we don't need no stinking vaccines, of any kind. And all the producers I work with, like I say, with one or two exceptions, don't use any vaccine, they don't use any chemical warmers, and they don't use any antibiotics. Why? They don't need them. They have healthy herds based on health from a healthy immune system. And that means they have to change pretty much everything. They have to mineralize their animals. They have to watch out for crowding. They have to watch out for mold mycotoxin that might be in the feed. They have to have their water tested because most rural water now is contaminated, polluted with nitrates. And that's a very bad situation from, again, this pollution from feedlots or from farmers that overdo it with nitrogen on their corn and beans.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Will, you were saying earlier that one farmer pivoted, he and his sons pivoted so that they could change the health of their pork, and actually it's benefited their company, their farm, in addition to their livelihood. But most conventional farmers, if they're reduced to the role, as you said, of caretaker or janitor, to me, the more natural way to go about it, like you said, with checking for mold and checking the water and testing the soil and different things, it's more involved. So there are a few that want to pivot from the conventional farming method to the regenerative, is the impression I'm getting from you.
Yeah, well, they've been sold a lie because the industry says you can't afford to do all that. And in a way, they're right because meat is so cheap right now. We're addicted to cheap food. And that myth is very powerful and very hard to break. And they're told that you can't afford to do all this stuff. And I have to admit, like at Thousand Hills, we pay enormous value for the meat that we buy directly from the farmer that we sell, so that they can afford to. Then they can afford to do that. So what it boils down to, a farmer, if you're a commodity farmer, let's say you're corn and beans or milk or whatever, if you're a commodity, if you're producing a commodity, you're a price taker. You take whatever they offer. That's it. So if they're offering 11 cents for pork a pound, or if they're offering $12 a hundredweight for milk, you either have to shut up or take it. We are price makers. There's only one place in the world you can get, in our example, Thousand Hills beef from Thousand Hills. We're a branded product. So we're not a commodity. It's not on the stock exchange. It's like, if you want a Thousand Hills beef or something like it, here's what the price is. And we figured that out from day one. We figured out we have to charge $4.99 a pound for hamburger. And at the time, this is 2002, you could buy hamburger all day long for $1.99 a pound, and they look pretty much alike in the case.
Yeah.
And people would point to us. We're sitting there with our little grilling. Why would I want to pay $5 a pound for the same thing I can get for $2 a pound? And if I was tired, if I'd been there all day, I go, well, here, taste it, and then you'll know.
Yeah. And maybe the answer to these consumers is the same thing that the companies would tell the farmers. You can't afford, actually, I would say, you can't afford to buy the cheap meat because the price you pay is the health, right?
And that won't work, because that goes against the grain, that irritates them. I mean, you're right. You're 100% right. But it's very difficult. Here's my hope, and this is probably sounds very pessimistic to you, is the people that are eating garbage food are dying faster, and the farmers that are exposed to all these toxins raising it are dying off. So we're entering a new era where people, it's Darwinian, but the people that are eating good food or raising good food are going to live longer. And just like I was a kid, I got off the farm as soon as I could get away to college, because farming in Kansas, our family are all wheat farmers. You're riding around in a circle all day on a John Deere tractor spraying poisons. And that did not appeal to me, even as stupid as I was and I was incredibly stupid. I did a lot of things I regret now. George Burns said, if I'd have known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. And I'm kind of that way. I'm paying for the donuts I ate when I was in college and the Coca-Cola, we rotted out our teeth, as kids, with all the candy that was available that, we're just craving it. So, we pay for that. But the young, I work with a lot of young farmers now, and the average age of a rancher is in the late 60s now. Late 60s. And I think it was Elon Musk or Bill Gates said you can evaluate the health of any profession by the average age. Like the Googlers, their average age is like 24. So there's a profession that has legs. It's going to last a long time. If the average age is 68 for ranchers, that's a profession that's dying, unless we get new blood. And we are seeing that. And we do run into these. There's two kinds of dilemma. One, a Sonny boy comes home from college and, Dad, I got all these great ideas. And Dad says, shut up and get out in the barn, Or Sonny boy goes to college and learns all this high-tech stuff. And Dad's saying, son, what my dad did is better than that. I know it sounds glossy and exciting to you, but we need to revert back to what Grandpa used to do. And so we see that we're, a lot of times I'm thinking to myself when I'm doing an intervention, you might say, of the consulting, is I feel like a family therapist a lot of times. I'm not trained in that, because there's usually someone that's the foot dragger that I don't know, this sounds too good to be true. And so you kind of have to find out who's the one that's fighting, change, even though change is absolutely necessary. And I've told this story to a lot of people, but we had one young guy came. I met him when he was 22, just graduated from ag school, from college.
Mm.
And he came home and his dad said, well, son, here's the keys to the farm. This farm is yours. And he had beautiful 1,200 acres of corn and beans. And he said, it's yours. I'm your hard hand. And this Ryan Herman's the guy's name. I love this kid. I met him when he was 22. And he said, well, Dad, I want to raise grass. I want to raise grass-fed beef. Well, to a corn and bean farmer, that is the enemy. That's like saying I want to raise coyotes and, jackrabbits or something, but his dad didn't have a heart attack and die on the spot, He did help his son. And the guy Ryan called me, and as a consultant, he did 100% of what I recommended. And that almost never happens. People might do 50% or, well, we couldn't find that, or we don't know if we're ready to do that. But he did 100%. And the next year he had a herd of cattle. And the second year he started making payments on the farm to his dad. His dad just gave it to him. He said, no, I'm going to pay you, Dad. This is $15,000 an acre corn ground. I'm going to pay you. And he did. He paid off the farm. Well, within the third year, he was in the black. He was making a profit. So now Ryan is married. He's got a couple kids on the ground. He is ranching, I believe, 3,800 acres, raising all 100% grass-fed beef, done the right way, and sheep. He has sheep now, hair sheep. And the point that made it so poignant to me, Ryan's best friend was a kid that grew on the next farm over. They rode the school bus together. They played ball together. They went to college together. When that kid came home, his dad said, well, dummy, you've been screwing around for 4 years in college. Here's a pitchfork. Get out there in the barn. Well, about a year later, that farm went belly up. That dad was not willing to change anything, went bankrupt, broke, went to town and died. And that kid is a hired hand for Ryan now. He has nothing. He has no farm, no heritage. All that went down the toilet.
I think people have gone through such a health crisis, and I'm not just talking about COVID. I think people are so depressed and anxious and lacking energy that they realize something has to change. And a lot of people are turning to food, and they understand the distinction, as you've been making it, between factory farms and farms that are doing it right. And even if they can't see behind the scenes, though I think there are videos, secret videos and things out there, they're realizing, okay, what's happening here isn't good for the planet or the animals or me, and they're making a different choice. Yes, exactly.
Well, you're a big part of that revolution with your podcast and the work you do with the Weston A. Price Foundation, Sally Fallon, Tom Cowan, all the others are, what Weston A. Price said, you educate. No, you teach. That was his dying words. And that's what it is all about. He was a holistic dentist in the 30s, and he knew that diet was related to whether you have goofed up teeth, cavities, sideways impacted molars, all of that. He figured out through diet. So, he said, you got to teach this, And if we don't have those kind of people, we're going to be eating a lot of Crisco, hydrogenated cottonseed oil, and oh no, it's pure, it's white. Look at it. How can it be bad? It's snow white, and it doesn't taste like a pig. And, they sold, when I grew up, we ate pie crust made with Crisco. And the farm families, they love Crisco, but they were sold a lie. And margarine, I grew up on margarine. My folks, farm family, like, well, margarine's healthier is what we were told, that margarine's better for you. And so I grew up as a kid. I didn't like butter as a little kid.
Wow. That's right. These appearances are deceiving, and all those kind of Franken foods on the grocery store shelf. I like to say, if it has a long shelf life, it's likely to shorten yours.
Oh, I've never heard that. That's really good.
But I think it's really true, because all those preservatives and all those weird chemicals in there, it'll last a long time up there, but it's not going to do well for your digestion and your health. So, so now we're getting near the end. Will, is there something that we need to know? You said ask your farmer if you want to know what practices they're using, indeed, especially if they're using an mRNA vaccine on their livestock. Is there something else we should be aware of if we want to be savvy consumers?
Well, first of all, you have to know a farmer to ask a farmer anything. So that's the first step, is go to the farmers markets for a starter. If you live in the city, go to the farmers market and find out, because not all farmers are noble or altruistic or care. Farmers, I had this. It was a sad admission for me to admit that most farmers are terrible ecologists, terrible. They'll spray anything. If they see a weed, they're going to zap it with glyphosate, with Roundup. And unfortunately, they're not noble. So by intrinsically, and there's a poverty mentality that comes from way back, way back. A lot of us think, oh, well, I was from a royal family when we were over in Europe. We're not. 99% of us are white trash. That was our roots. Seriously.
Wow.
Or slave. And white trash people are not taught altruism or nobility of the honest kind. They're taught survival. You know, you're in a trailer and you're on welfare, and you know that just begets itself. So you know that whole thing about as we get more wealthy and as we prioritize how we spend our money, this is going to be a huge thing. I'm an optimist. I believe what we're doing at the West A. Price Foundation, all the chapter leaders, that's where I want to hang out. And these restaurants that have farm to table food, and if it's real farm to, that's where I want to spend my restaurant money. I don't go to Perkins or Applebee's or these places, even the high quality restaurants, that everything still comes off the Cisco truck, you know, from the restaurant. They just gussy it all up.
And once you've seen behind the scenes, you can't unsee it. I think you especially know what goes on. You've been in those hoop houses that go for, you know, yards and yards and yards, and you've seen the conditions of those animals. I think once you've seen that, you're like, oh no, I can't have that chicken because I know where it's been, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of PETA people are nutballs, you know, and but they're educating people. They're behind the scenes. They're hidden cameras. I got to respect them. They're risking their life to do that. Some of them have been killed to expose these cruelties. And so I'm a big fan. You know, people eating tasty animals. For me, that's my version of PETA. But you know, it's
people eating tasty animals. So I kind of like that.
Yeah. But so we're all in this together. I love your podcast. I love what you're doing. And being a veterinarian, I feel obliged to the plight of animals. That to me is everything in my life. I've been there since I was a little kid, and I still I like people too. But you know, I like my dog better than a lot of people.
Oh, I've heard that happens in a lot of dog families. They prefer their dog's company to other people. But listen, Will, I love your company, but I want to pose the final question to you here that we pose on the show. Now, I'm cognizant of the fact that you are a veterinarian, and but you've lived a long time, and I want to ask you the question I like to pose here at the end. If the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, only one thing.
With nutrition.
Yeah, how should they get there?
Well, I have to use a trite phrase is know your farmer. You know, and that's what it boils down to, and that takes work. I'm qualifying my own axiom here, but it means you have to pay more attention to what you're eating and study, and it requires education and knowledge, and it requires you to get away from the propaganda from big food or big ag. We have to get beyond propaganda, and that's challenging. Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, said, there's no coming to consciousness without pain. And that's the only phrase I have on the wall in my office here. There's no coming to consciousness without pain. In other words, people that are not in pain, when you're 18 years old and someone says, you know, smoking is bad for you. So what? I don't want to be an old person, you know, or something like that. They're not in pain yet. Right. And the farmers who come to me, they don't come to me. Nobody ever calls a holistic vet, tells me how great their life is and how great their animal is. The only people that call me are in pain. Their things are not working. The wheels have fallen off and they're in pain and they know they have to change something. So I guess that's what it boils down to is if you're not in pain, you're not aware, you're not going to change anything. You're fat and happy. And then all of a sudden you get diabetes or you get stroke or you get a heart attack and then you're in pain. And then what was it you said about grass-fed beef, you know? So, and that's a sad reality is that if you're not in pain, you will not change anything. That's just human nature. And, you know, so, you know, some people are very lucky. They eat junk food and they, you know, it's like, it seems unfair, but it's true. I mean, granted, they'd be smarter and happier and better looking if they ate better, but still, people can get away with murder. Our body is so incredible that we can tolerate abuse every day. Eating donuts and KFC and chugging soda pop, and you still live quite a few years.
It's
But
true.
yeah, I just hope people can have some pain
Well,
enough, wake them up, but not permanently damage them.
yes,
That's an ideal situation.
right. And that's exactly what the Weston A. Price Foundation, the podcast, all of these initiatives are about. It's about what your work is too. It's kind of getting to people before it's too late, right?
Yeah.
Before they do have too much pain and they just can't even continue. And I'm so grateful for the time you spent today, for your anecdotes, for your warmth, and for your heart. Thank you so much, Will.
I wish I could hug you right now, but I'm thinking it. Yes. Oh yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Next time we see each other at the conference, hopefully next year or this
Big,
year.
big hugs, and I hope everybody that's listening can come to one of the conferences. It's the kind of thing that changes your life. And when you meet
100%.
somebody that has the message that you've been living your life longing to hear, you hear it. That's the only original sin, is if you know better but you don't change. It's fine to not know anything. That's just ignorance, is just what we're born with. But to know better and still do it the evil way, that's a crime to me.
Yeah.
So we want people not only to know better, but to do better.
I love it. Well, thank you for empowering us today. Really appreciate it, Will.
Okay, thank you.